we really okay, got it. Sorry. Just told me we're recording, which is good. So when we think about how to help students be successful on their academic journey, we really think about it as beginning with a three-step process, right? We want to engage our students, and by engaging our students, we can help them be successful. And if we have engaged and successful students, we're more likely to retain those students. So that's sort of big picture. And then honing in on what we're doing here today is talking about how we at CTU work to achieve this goal. So we're here to talk about our findings related to this experiment that we've been running around identifying and adapting our instruction to different student types. And we see this really as a way to build community through connecting with our students, but also connecting our students to their fellow students, which ultimately connects them to the university at large. This allows us to engage them, help them be successful, and thus retain them long term, right? So first I want to set a baseline. When we think about instruction here at CTU, we think about it in terms of individualization. We see the online classroom as both providing us, but also necessitating the need for and the ability to individualize instruction. No surprise to any educators here, different students need different types of motivation and support. This is true in the online classroom. This is true in a face-to-face classroom. But the uniqueness of the online classroom is that it provides us those opportunities to individualize instructions for students, but it also necessitates that we individualize instruction for students because the online classroom can be an impersonal, isolating experience. And so, as we're moving through today, we keep this always in mind, this idea of individualizing instruction. And so that's really what this experiment was born out of, is finding alternative, different, more ways to facilitate this individualization of instruction. And so thinking about student types, what types of students do we have? How do we identify them? And then how do we provide instruction based on those student types? So obviously, step number one is identifying the student types, right? And we at CTU are very lucky that our administration has been helping us with this. And so we're actually using admissions indicators to identify broad groups of students and then schedule them into their first session student success course according to that identified type. And this allows our faculty to focus on the specific needs of these broad groups of students and thus be more successful at helping students make those connections, engaging those students, setting that foundation for helping them be successful long-term in their academic journey. So you can see here these slides, and these groupings that I've mentioned here on the slides are specific to CTU. This is the terminology that we use, but they do speak to larger groupings of students that you may encounter. The first timers, that's the obvious one, first time college students, students who've never been to college, maybe your first generation college students. So that is one that we all encounter. When we think about the corporate partners, CTU has agreements with several large corporations, and so they help support their students in coming to our university. But we could also think about these students as those students with a very clear goal. Oftentimes these are older students. Oftentimes these are students who are returning to college, either returning to get a higher degree, so associates to bachelor's, students who are coming for a second bachelor's degree, students coming for a second associate. These are often students with some college experience under their belt. And then the last group is what we call our late registers. And these are students who have enrolled at the university within the first week of the start of the session. We actually allow students to enroll up through that first week of the session. So these are students who are sort of coming in almost last minute. So you could also think of these as students who are making the decision to come to school, and they may not quite be as sure that this is what they should be doing. So that's how we are categorizing our students. which then allows our faculty to immediately know something about their students when they come into their classroom. So this is something obviously we share with our faculty. You know, this session you're teaching a group of students who are first timers, right? Or you're teaching a late register section. And so knowing where students fall into these three categories allows our faculty to hone their instructional strategies. So here's some just sort of generalizations about strategies to engage, but I want to highlight some commonalities and also some uniquenesses to these types and the strategies we use. You'll see in all of these this idea of motivation, helping students to not, maybe with your late registers, find the motivation for going to college, helping those first timers to hone that motivation for being in college, and those corporate partners reminding them, okay, this is what is motivating you. How do we hold on to that motivation? Another commonality in all of these is relevance, making sure that students understand the relevance of what we're teaching them. And, you know, with those corporate partners, making sure that the topics are relevant to their specific fields. You know, this is why you have to take history, even if you're going into a computer science degree, that sort of thing. And then, you know, flexibility. Flexibility with our first time students because they're just acclimating to this environment. And then flexibility with those late register students. They're coming in late. Let's help get ourselves acclimated, which sort of leads to that fourth commonality of acknowledging where the students are. And this is one of the key places where we build community. Those first timers, hey, all of you are new to this college experience. What kind of lessons, what kind of support can we provide one another in this classroom? Corporate partners, all of you work for a corporation that's helping you be here at the university. You know, let's build on that common experience. And same thing with our late registers. So that, you know, sort of applying those broad commonalities in very different ways across the board here. And then the other thing I want to mention is, you know, the assumption of knowledge. There is assumed knowledge that we often think about for those of us who've been in academics for a long time, you know, just basic terminology like GPA, discussion board, labs, academic honesty, these basic terms that we all encounter and are very comfortable with on a regular basis, you know, making sure that you understand that this is a first time student, they may not be familiar. So also just understanding where our students are and meeting them there can help individualize that instructional experience. And so by separating students out into these sections, it makes that lift of individual instruction a little bit easier for our faculty. Now we understand that not all universities can do this. We understand that not all students fall into these categories, that there are multiple other categories that students might fall into. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Amanda Herwadek, now to talk some more about those more specific categories and how we might identify students in those categories.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to talk about next is one of the areas where we are very fortunate. I am lead faculty over our first year experience course, our UNIV 104 course. And having these admissions indicators where we know going in exactly where our students are coming from in terms of their college experience, it really provides us a foundation. And then after having this foundation, then that allows us to read our classroom and really build a strong framework for learning how to adjust our strategies, how to adjust our outreach, how we're going to work with these students. When we're reading the classroom, what we have found is once we have the foundation in place, we can more easily recognize subtypes and adjust our strategies to fit those subtypes. What you see here on the screen before you are a list of some of the subtypes that we have found specifically within our first year experience classroom. We have students who are working adults, who are parents, juggling multiple roles within their lives in addition to being a student. We have students across the spectrum from being highly motivated to maybe lacking some confidence, maybe being academically underprepared. Even though we are primarily an online institution, we even have students who are maybe technology novices, not just in terms of your basic computer knowledge, but specifically learning how to navigate our learning management system and other tools here at CTU. So these are the kind of types that we have developed. And what we want now is to really hear from you. So we want to open up for some discussion. If we can go to the next slide. So what we're curious about from you, are there additional student types that you have identified at your institution? Dr. Carmack has put a link within the chat pod. You have two ways to provide us your feedback, either by going to the link, and that'll take you to an online poll where we will be able to share information with the group as a whole, or you can text to the information on the screen as well. But if you will, please visit the website or type in the chat pod if that's easier for you, and let us know what kind of student types have you found at your institution.
So Amanda, real quick, while people are navigating to the site and starting to begin to put in their student types that they've identified, Amy brought up a great question in the chat box that I want to respond to. She says, how do you balance identifying subtypes to meet students' needs without labeling students or making assumptions? And the first thing that comes to my mind is acknowledging what the students tell us. So it's less about making assumptions and more about identifying what students tell us and using that information. So I know, in the broad categories I talked about, they might appear to be assumptions, the first time student, we really try to work closely with admissions to make those identifications before we schedule the students in that area. But Amanda, do you want to talk a little bit more about where in the classroom we get this information about our individual students?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that we really hit hard at CTU and when working with our adjunct faculty in training is it's really important to personalize communications to your students and make sure that you are recognizing the student as an individual. So ways that we can gather this information in the classroom is through our discussion boards. Our students interact within discussion boards almost every single week of the session, starting with an introduction. We have an instant messenger tool where we can gather information about students. We have Zoom live chats, similar to what we're in now, where we can gather that information. And when asking the question about balancing, it's all about recognizing the backgrounds of our students, the roles that they're dealing with, but also realizing that we have to recognize our students as individuals. And we also do that through our instructional strategies as well. I see a lot of things here that are very similar to the student types that we have identified or that we see. Military students, full-time students, we see non-traditional students. Some of the strategies that we have used with those students that are non-traditional or military, realizing that not everyone fits within the same peg. That comes back to the individualization, being flexible, making the content relevant to where they are in their current stage of life. So really meeting our students where they are. I see ability here. So we have students who are across the gamut, maybe being academically underprepared versus being very motivated and confident. Our strategy there is to make sure that we're connecting students with the appropriate resources to make sure that they have what they need to continue on successfully. Let's see, what else do we see here? Parents. Yeah, we have a lot of students who are parents. We work to adjust and provide flexibility as much as possible. That's one of our strategies that we offer our students within our first year experience course. Let's see, there are a lot of things here that we're identifying. Traditional, that, obviously is opposite of non-traditional. Again, all about connecting with our students and meeting them where they are at their stage of life. So it's really a neat process to, when you have a good framework, to know kind of the basics of where your students are coming from, and then reading your classroom to offer that individuality and be able to adjust your instructional strategies appropriately. Maggie, do you want to go back to the PowerPoint and we can dig in a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. Some really interesting stuff here. One I see is, students with learning disabilities, right? And then I saw another one about food insecurity. And, these are great opportunities for partnerships across the university. And, we titled this Building Community, right? So building community for that student with various groups across the university. So the faculty offering what they can in the classroom, and then also helping that student make the connection to those other areas of the university, whether it's your academic coaches, whether it's student services, ADA, helping to the student and being that connection for them to help them connect around the university as well.
At CTU, we're very fortunate to have a ton of resources across the gamut for our students, and hopefully you do as well at your university. But as instructors, we can't be everything for everybody as much as we might like to be. So that's why it's important to have resources that we're able to connect our students with. So what you see on the screen and what will actually be on the next slide are how we have addressed some of the subtypes that we have in our classroom and how we've adjusted strategies. And you can see it aligns pretty well with a lot of the different student subtypes that you found. And what we try to do is connect our content as much as possible and meet students where they are within their lives and really make it relevant. If you want to go to the next slide. So same thing, connecting students with resources, knowing when to be flexible. And again, this is much easier if you already have that base foundation. It's a lot easier to be able to read your classroom within the discussion boards and other areas to be able to create that individualization. And I'll hand it back to Dr. Carmack to wrap up.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Gonna go off script here for a second. I remember when I first started teaching online a decade ago now. It seemed very click the button, follow the path, and what we have clearly said today is that online instruction is as hands-on as classroom instruction, if maybe not more so, because of this necessity for individualizing instruction to help our students succeed. And so, one of the things that here's a slide about our findings, right? We've discovered that by identifying and adapting our strategies to these different types, allow more pathways to helping engage our students in the classroom with their classmates, which ultimately increases their chances at success and bringing them much closer to achieving that goal of graduation. And so, as I acknowledged at the beginning, not everyone can schedule their students according to student type, but that's one thing that we plan to continue going forward for our student success course in their first session. But this is also something that we're hoping to expand to our other faculty and our other courses. So, as administrators, thinking about how we can recognize our faculty strengths and schedule them accordingly, especially in those first courses. Amanda's been working with her faculty, identifying who are really good with those first time students, who are folks that are really good with helping those students who are coming in a little bit behind, and making sure we put the right faculty in front of the right students. And then as faculty, we've been really working ourselves and amongst our adjunct faculty population to talk about, how do we read our classrooms, find this information, and then utilize this information that students give us in the classroom to identify what type they are and how we can then use these strategies. So it's all about, making ourselves effective and efficient at helping our students be successful. So, to wrap up here, we feel like we've really learned a great deal from this experiment with identifying student types and helping us to adapt our strategies, develop new strategies according to those student types. And we hope that you'll be able to learn from this as well. Again, the key is that in this online classroom, it's imperative to recognize the individuality of our students and capitalize on those opportunities that they give us by letting us know a little bit about themselves and finding those opportunities in the online classroom to work with our students on that individual basis, to engage them and help them be successful at reaching that ultimate goal of graduation. So we hope that you could take some of these strategies and use them to engage your faculty, your students at your university. We know that this was a very short time and I see that I am over. So we appreciate everyone's time and attention and participation today. There's our contact information on the screen. We look forward to carrying on this conversation in the future with all of you all. So have a great day. Thank you for joining us.